Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have RANDOMAX. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Astroport, RANDOMAX released for the PC in January of 2025, the latest in their Astro Saga series that includes other titles like Volkaiser and Vol Vehicles. This one is a vertical scrolling shoot 'em up that has roguelite elements to it. So if you're looking for a title that's got a bit of randomness to it, or you're a fan of Astroport's other titles, this is definitely one I encourage you to check out. The price point on Steam is very low. In addition to that, there's also a demo, so there's not much barrier to entry. It also plays great on a Steam Deck. All the gameplay you're seeing today has been played on such. And with all that said, we find ourselves at the main menu. The game does have an excellent tutorial, so if you pick this one up, definitely play through that. There's also a collections menu where we can view the various bosses we fought, as well as all the random weapons we've collected throughout the course of our gameplay, a ranking that breaks things down by difficulty. Sadly, there aren't online leaderboards for this game, but it's still nice to go and see how well you've done. And then, starting a new game, we're taken to our difficulty selection. Here we have 5 difficulties available, and there's a 6th unlockable. In addition to that, we also have a custom difficulty, where you can adjust your gameplay, make things either easier or harder by adjusting these elements here, and the score multiplier will scale accordingly. For our purposes today, we will be playing the game on normal. Selecting our difficulty, we're taken to our movement input type, either digital or analog. Since we're playing this on a Steam Deck, it makes sense to play it on analog, as that'll be a little more comfortable with the sticks. Then we find ourselves at the player select. Here we can choose between 3 different characters, each with different attributes. So the first ship has the faster movement speed and stronger optional equipment. Then we have one with average movement speed but additional ammunition, and lastly slower movement speed but extra shields. For our purposes today, we'll go with the additional ammunition. Once you've selected your character, we have these loading screens which shows you the stages that we've played, and there are a total of 7 stages total, and now we're jump right into the gameplay. So this is a vertical scrolling shoot 'em up, but their information on the sides is important, so there is no Tate presentation for this game. Throughout the course of your gameplay, you're going to come across these Argo Express secret offices, and this is where the random roguelite element of the gameplay is largely based. Here, we'll be given a choice of random weapons, a selection of 72 potential different weapons. And the way the gameplay works as far as our different shots, we have 3 shot buttons, each with a different weapon associated with it. When we're given a random weapon, we can choose to replace one of our existing weapons with the weapon, or we could simply just discard it. You don't want to really do that unless you know it's a weapon you just don't like. So for this weapon here, the 9-way shot, we could choose to replace either shot 1, 2, or 3. The way you do that is you press the button you want to put it on. In this case, let's put it on shot 1, and then you press that same button again to confirm. And once you're done with all your selection, you leave the shop. If you get lucky, you can potentially get as many as 3 different items from those shops, each with different weapons, or potentially special equipment, or optional equipment as the game refers to it, choices. So now we're back in the thick of things. As we destroy enemies, they'll drop 2 special items. And you see there's a blue line on the screen. If we go above that blue line, then we'll trigger an auto collection of those items. And I'll explain those items here in just a moment. But we now find ourselves at the next shop. So now we have this choice of this big ring, and our descriptions of the weapons are off to the right. So if you're ever curious what it does, well, you can read through that, and it'll give you a good idea of what you're dealing with. So for our purposes right now, we'll throw this on shot 2, and now we have our first optional equipment. So the optional equipment allows you to power up one of 5 different equipments. So there's a satellite, which is basically like an option, guard, which you have bits that rotate around the ship, in this case flame. So these are the 3 we have the choice from here. So flame field basically is this fire field which will ignite enemies that are close to us. Then we also have the eraser, which is a line that will sweep up around our ship. going into racing shots periodically, and then the line itself. So that collection line, it will go and actually move it further down the screen. That's the one I like to power up when given the option, but since it's not there, let's go and place this one on the satellite spot. So that you select it here the same way, you go and press the shop button you want it to be on, and then the confirmation. So now we have a satellite which will always be firing, and we can see the way that ring shot we picked up works. It's just fires rings that are really big around us initially, get smaller. I'm not sure, maybe I've had this one. So the game has a total of 72 different weapons, so you can have a great combination throughout the course of your runs that will really vary things up. So we have another shop here, and this one has given us more special equipment, and we do have the ability to upgrade the line, so I will do that. So now our auto collection line for the special items that the enemies drop is now lower, and making it easier to suck those in. So what are those special items that we're picking up from the enemies? There are two of them. The ones that are represented as hearts are called the energy items, and those ones fill up a shield meter around the ship, or should we already have a shield, it fills up this maximum meter. And if you get to maximum state, that gives you a lot of extra points, as well as the ability to fill up the next extend, which is basically working towards an additional 1-up. So here we find ourselves before we talk about the other item, we find ourselves approaching the boss. So you do have these character scenes, but where the two characters, the one you're playing and the boss we're fighting, will have an interaction. And each of the different characters has one boss that they're specifically have more dialogue with. So if you're interested, you can definitely read through that. But the story is just like some light fluff. So the other item that we have is the stars, and those will fill up our special power gauge there in the bottom left. And we'll talk about that when we actually are able to fill it up, so you can kind of get a better idea of how that's working. So the boss, when you are fighting a boss, there is a life meter that's in the top right of the screen. So I do appreciate that we do have a meter for the boss itself. Especially on some of the easier difficulties, the bosses aren't too hard to take out. We do get a bit more character interaction back and forth, and then we move on to the next stage. So that other item that we're collecting is the special item, and those will fill up the special power meter there in the bottom left. Once that's full, you have one of 6 different effects that takes place. So one could potentially have a screen clearing like thunder flash. Another has refills the ammo of the weapons you have, and there are others that power up our optional equipment, or even give us one level of all the various optional equipments, though just temporarily. So now we have our next item, the search laser. So this one's a nice homing one, and a lot of times when I'm collecting weapons, I'll tend to go and put similar weapons on a certain shot. So if we had a lot of homing weapons, I might have those on, say, shot button 3. I might have like a spread or like 3-way kindness shots on button 1, and then maybe like a button 2 would be kind of like a flex slot. But that's just myself. You're totally welcome to assign things however you go and see fit. And as I mentioned, it is also possible to reject the various weapon choices in the shop if you don't like them. But once again, it's a situation that you rarely want to go and do unless you find something that you just generally don't like using or just isn't very effective for you. As we use the weapons that we've collected, they will ultimately deplete their ammunition, and when the ammunition runs out, it will drop back to the next shot in order. We actually got really lucky with this shot. There's 3 different items to choose from, so we've got the free reshot, which we'll throw on this one. Starfalls, which we'll put on button 2. That's a really fun laser that just kind of encompasses the entire vertical slice of the screen, and then an optional equipment increase as well, which will use the eraser, so you can kind of see how that works. So the eraser fills up a meter on the left of the screen, and that meter, when it fills up, will send a little flash that will deal damage as well as erase enemy shots in that path. So what happened there when we had that flash that said maximum, I was able to fill up the shield gauge and then the shield gauge one more time with the heart items, the energy items, and that it brought us into maximum state, which while you're in that state, it increases your score and also allows you to increase the next extend gauge. And now we find ourselves fighting our next boss. So the bosses are kind of fixed if you're playing on lower difficulty, but if you're playing on higher difficulty, you have some different random bosses that you can encounter. And there's actually quite a few bosses in the game. As I mentioned, there's 42 different weapons, but between normal bosses and sub-bosses in the game, mini-bosses, you encounter there's over 40 different bosses that you can counter as well. And once again, there's a little bit of a story back and forth between the characters when we finish the stage, and then we move on to our next stage. And with all that, that is RANDOMAX served up for your enjoyment. So it's definitely a game that overall, well, it kind of depends on what you're given as far as your weapon selection. Some selections will definitely make the game significantly easier, but if you're not getting good drops or many drops from the shop, things will be a little bit on the harder side. So it really kind of depends on what your luck ends up being. So we have this guard lightning bomb, we'll throw that one on shot 2 again. And for another optional equipment, we already have one level of each of these ones, so we'll use this to lower our line. The game is just it's just a lot of fun, even though it's on the easier side, because you've got that just element of random chaos from the selection that we have, the selection of bosses. I really appreciate that we've got the ability to tailor the difficulty if you so want with the custom difficulty mode as well. But that's not to say the game isn't perfect or always like a super fun time to play through. Real quick, what you did see there is I did go and use up a weapon, so it briefly pauses, slows down time, just so you can see that that's the case, and then progresses on after you move on to the next weapon. So as far as the minus flavors are concerned, so one of the things that is a bit of an issue there are some graphical elements that kind of are jarring and a little bit in the way, kind of when you do run out of a special weapon. So like here, for example, that's a pretty jarring thing to go and see on the screen. And when we fill up the maximum gauge and there's that massive flash of maximum with the character that goes and appears on the screen, that can be pretty distracting to see in the middle of your gameplay, and it kind of almost kind of pulls you out a little bit of the game. I don't necessarily like that it's like that intrusive. Then another minor complaint, sometimes it's not very easy in the chaos of your own shots and what's going on in the gameplay to see the enemy shots all that easily, or sometimes you'll even like lose yourself with the enemies and collide into them and take damage that way. So I would have appreciated it if it was just a little easier to see some of the enemy shots, and well, a lot of it is like that there can be enemies from front, behind, all over the place. And then lastly, there's no online leaderboards present in the game itself, which is a little bit disappointing. But on the plus side, you have that roguelite element of all the random weapons that not only is it like fun to go and play roguelite, but a lot of the weapons that they designed are a lot of fun. You have ones like this charge shot here, you've got a ton of different homing options. There's also some that are just a ton of fun to use. There's ones that will let you warp around, ones that will let you pause time and graze bullets for a bullet time counterattack. And there's one where we're throwing bees at enemies. I love like some of the creativity that we see with the different weapons that are given to us throughout the course of the run. And the optional equipment is fun to power up as well, though unless you get super lucky, you're not going to really increase the levels of those ones substantially throughout the course of our gameplay. But the game does have a lot of whimsical fun as well, you know, like getting weapons like this saw blade and attacking the boss with that. So at the end of the day, I've had a lot of fun playing RandoMax. I really enjoyed the demo when it originally came out, and I've had a lot of fun playing through the full game since it released as well. It's one that at the end of the day, the chef can definitely recommend. That is RandoMax served up for your enjoyment. And with that, we find ourselves at the end of this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, we want to thank you so much for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful week yourself, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.